Me too. My turn. I would like to thank Tony Carman and you, Stephanie, of course, and of course Fabrice Rosier from the Institut Français for initiating this curatorial exchange and that I've been part of between France and Chicago. So regarding this invitation, I conceived this panel as a kind of announcement of the upcoming first Chicago Architecture Biennial by evoking how the radical abstract art can escape from the canvas and reinvent abstraction as an art in itself, as a form of art. So this kind of art can accept the canvas, of course, but also the sculpture to integrate to itself some architectural inner qualities, such as real space, environment, or the integration of perceptual phenomenology. For this purpose, I invited two of the best artists of this field who explored and literally built this fascinating aesthetic field or aesthetic dimension. Daniel Buren on my left and Felice Varini next to him. Also, in order to extend this dimension to other artistic practices that basically work in this way, in this particular aesthetic field since the 1960s, I wanted also to invite a collector. Nicolas Cattelain came to my mind immediately because of his collection includes a considerable number of works that initiated this kind of extension, this kind of transgression of the classical frame of abstract art, and of course of this definition. This discussion then will start with an unfortunately far too reductive presentation of a few images that will basically only show a few aspects of the works. Those very works, the one collected by Nicolas, but the one from Daniel Buren and Felice Varini, are the less photogenic in the world. They can produce nice photographs, but they will definitely lie so much about the real quality of the work. So please forgive photography in the end. So, for example, this question basically was explored, of course, since the beginning of constructivism. We can see early environments in the constructivist era, but that's not where we are going, but that's where it's coming from. And basically, the idea of construction, of constructivist art is basically in the back of many of those contemporary or modern practices that we are going to talk about. But first, without presenting in a very long CV our friends here, I would like them to present their works with their own words, and that's definitely the most precise and a valuable contribution they can make to this discussion. And after this 10 minutes of presentation each, we will have a discussion and of course open our panel to the questions in the audience. So thank you, Daniel. Thanks again for being here. I'll let you start your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. So I am afraid it's going to be much too quick, but anyhow, I will stop when the 10 minutes will be out. So, few works dealing with architecture. This was done in New York at the John Weber Gallery, 73, and did consist in few words. First, to take out one of the windows of the gallery. That was the beginning of all these galleries downtown in New York, where they really changed from a small or rather small apartment where were all the gallery before to a big space, all storage becoming free for use. So this gallery was a very large space on 420 West Broadway. You will understand a little bit why I use such a dispositif to make the work. So we take out one of the windows of the gallery, and we pull a cable from the house in front of the gallery straight to the end of the space. On this cable, I hang up a series of curtains which have the size of the window of the architecture, and then the space between two was connected with the space of the facade of the building. So that being the key to install everything, one piece was in the middle, inside, outside of the window. All the others were crossing the street with the same rhythm, and I duplicate the same size as the street inside the gallery. And then first thing to realize, the gallery was much larger than the street itself. So here, from the middle, going to the street, and of course, playing. I did many works at that time, playing with the inside, outside, and all these elements, changing a work depending of the position of the spectator. So in the street, it was 24 hours a day. In the gallery, with the open hours of the gallery. Then going with or against the wind and the sun and the rain, etc. And then protected like any work in a gallery. And all this dialectic was part of the exhibition. So I go pretty fast. You have some pictures. Why also I always show many pictures is the fact that, first of all, I don't like too much picture for the work, but it's also true that if I show one picture, it's totally impossible to get the idea of the piece. So as far as it's always done to have hundreds of different points of view, the picture, I mean, more picture give a little bit that feeling. So here we are on West Broadway, and with this incredible environment. And today, for example, when you consider that the work I did, and I did it twice, but I don't want to go deeper on this description, but the work was, of course, the duration of the show, and after that does not exist anymore. And strange enough, because the second step of the show 5 or 6 years later was to really show what changed, if not the work itself, which was the same one reinstalled. Now even the decor of the street, which no one will have imagined, was as well ephemeral when you realize what did happen with the Twin Towers. We jump, a big jump of time in Paris, in the Palais Royal, for the very first work permanent done somewhere. I did hundreds of works before outside in many places, but they were always for few days or few months, but never permanent. So this one is the first one permanent. Very quickly also, if not you don't know how it's working, this is the plane of this Palais Royal courtyard. The little dots, the little round circle black are where exist the columns in this area, which is one of the characteristics of the architecture. And the column you have on the top of the picture are the only ones which are regular. And they were done in the 19th century. And all the rest on the right and left of the projection are not regular. So the space in between, it's always different. This is strongly revealed by the grid I draw on the floor, which has the axe and the regulation of the grid, finally the size of the grid, given by the columns which are on the top of the photo. And when you look to that grid on left and right, you see that this alignment which is absolutely correct with columns on the top, became totally different from one column to another, because the regulation of this rhythm is totally not chaotic, but completely irregular, which of course you don't really see normally without this grid. And what is a little more gray, we are going to see very quickly. It's in fact a big fountain, which is underneath the floor, but you can see when you walk on top through a grill. So here is the Palais Royal. On the very left, you have the garden, which is much bigger than the courtyard. Then on the middle of the picture, you have this double series of columns, which is like a cut between the courtyard and the garden, and then the piece using this courtyard. This courtyard was, till this work, was a parking lot. So you see the grid, and you see this trench where, in fact, a series of polygons with the same diameter as the columns given by the real architecture are installed and done. So you have a series which are pretty big, like 3 meters 20, and which is the exact size of the grid, on the floor. And all dimension in this work can be seen vertically and horizontally. And the small ones are in fact following the curve of the courtyard, which is a very busy space in the heart of Paris, which means also it was impossible to be concave, which I will have preferred as a place. And so all the use of these small elements are to fight against the fact the full place is convex. So during the digging of the fountain, on the right of the photo, you have a big room for the Comédie Française, which is just next to the courtyard, where in fact you cannot dig anymore. So when you walk in the middle, you are like 20, 25 centimeters from the top of this building. The arrival of these elements, all the material are typically material everywhere used in Paris area. So marble, granite, concrete, asphalt, steel, and water. And finally, electricity as well. So when the work is finished, the fountain runs underneath, and just from a high point, it's 3 high points with the gravity going down to the 0 altitude. So turning around, all the small polygons are aligned to the foot of the columns around, and they are all aligned to give a perfect horizontal plates. And the paradoxically thing is the fact that the very tall polygons, which seems to go smaller and smaller, are all the same. So what they reveal to the visitor, to the spectator, it's exactly the oblique of the cascade of water which is underneath, which go till the point 0, where all the water go back to a reserve and then recycle and turn all the time. At night, it's a different piece in a way, just used by the lighting of the fountain. We see here in blue, and all the crisscross of the grid, which are red in one part and green in the other. So when you're on top of the grill, you can automatically see what is under your feet. And also this element of water, I think it's quite interesting in this courtyard where everything is mineral except the sound of the water and then the view of the water if you are on top. At one cross of the of this trench on top, it's a hole which gives the possibility to see a little immediately to the people how the water crisscross and how it's built underneath. This is different work done in a place in Bordeaux, which is a museum. Did turn as a museum, was an old reserve for grain, and then a theater, and finally a museum. So the work consisted in constructing a kind of an oblique floor from the left, which is the entrance at the degree 0, and going up to the first floor or second floor, in American way to speak, to the loggia of this full architecture. Then, during the time we did this support for a floor, we covered all the arches, small and very big. So you have many different type of circles with a serigraphy on the material which is directly attached to the wall and follows the curve. The floor is covered. So first with a piece of wood like that, and then which was completely finally covered with a mirror. And as soon as, of course, that was finished, the full architecture started to be completely different. With one aspect is the fact that instead of being completely submerged by even the quality, the beauty of this architecture, you were able to control the view because you see the thing with a kind of a distance, which in fact, when you get into, it's like in a church, you are submerged by the architecture itself. So it was a game reversing very much the way to look around. And just quickly, some of this result with this huge piece reflecting the full architecture. You were able to walk all around, so that was given by the space, and that's exactly where this floor of glass arrived. And on top of that was a full floor where I did the second part of the show, but that's the only one part I wanted to show you right now. And I don't know what time is it, but I think we should stop.
Maybe it would be the last last work. I know you have many, and many of them actually enter in the field of this conversation. But maybe a quick presentation of this one, of course, your last retrospective in the States.
So this one done at the Guggenheim in 2005. It's difficult to speak shortly about the way it's done, but let's say you enter the museum and you were in a space very, very dark instead of happening to be under this extraordinary cupola of the Guggenheim. So this is the entrance. Inside the entrance, you were like in a funny kind of a chimney, quite dark, with a scaffolding, and making a 90 degrees angle in which you are confronted immediately. Just to say also that the 90-degree angle does not exist in the Guggenheim. So that's the introduction of something very contradictory to the full construction of right. And then going out of this triangle, you get introduced to what everyone knows, the ramp and the cylindric construction of right, where in fact all of the sudden the light, which is always quite fantastic there, it's even immediately stronger because the fact we just arrived from a very dark place. And the outside of this construction is totally covered with mirror. The center of the angle is right in the center of the architecture. And as you can see, the mirroring effect of the full ramp, which is broken as soon as the ramp touches these reflecting mirrors. So it's coming almost to the top. The top of the angle is right in the middle of the cupola. And you can turn all around, of course, climbing or coming down, and you go all the time in the dark and in the light, in the dark, in the light. The full ramp, where usually are the exhibition, it's totally empty, so you can still and even re-see very well the original architecture. And the only thing which was, in fact, making an introduction inside the ramp was the reflection of the cupola, which I divided with pieces of filters, which was giving a color inside the rotunda. So just a few slides, and I will stop. I discovered during the piece something very strange and interesting. You know, that's more or less the only architecture in New York which is with no connection, direct connection, with the grid of New York, with the right angle, etc. And then in the ground floor of the Guggenheim, Wright designed some desk for different purpose. And when we finished to put the work together, we realized that the desk, which was, let's say, imagine the left of the picture, it's reflecting here in the mirrors. And this reflection, it's exactly superposed to the real other desk, which is at this place in the basement, in the ground floor. Like that, you can see even better. But the meaning of such a thing is the fact that Wright finally used the right angle, but you never see it really.
Thank you, Daniel. That was fantastic. To sum up all what you said, and the only little examples the time frame, gave us the opportunity to show, all you can see is that the architecture is always the basis of every of your work. You have the seminal system of the parallel bands, and in the end, every work is totally different because every time you consider architecture as the basis of every work. It's not you deal with the place, and that's definitely the connection we can make with Felice Varini's work, who is basically every time in situ. To take your name, you don't have any micro. You have one here. Oh, does it work?
Hello.
Hello. So that's definitely the connection. And but what I like, especially in the presentation of Daniel, it was the presence of the scaffoldings that you show actually to introduce your work. Basically, the scaffoldings are really present within Felice Varini's work as well, as you basically play with architecture on every scale, and you need to construct something that you will make disappear in the end, because let's say you're more a painter, you see, and you qualify yourself. I mean, remember a discussion we had a few years ago as a painter. So let me introduce your part and just take the remote control of Daniel. Oh, you don't have any remote control. I think you do. I think you just a technical, very big issue we are facing here. No, c'est toi. It's you.
Hello.
So,
Silver.
Please.
Okay. I begin to work like that in 1978. I decided to work on the space all time, and with the painting. I come from painting. I am a painter, artist painter, but I leave the frame. I leave the studio for work all time in the architecture on the space. And from this time, I work with the point of view.
Point of view.
I'm sorry for my English. I don't speak English normally, but I try to speak today.
You're good. You're doing
Okay,
good.
thank you. And the point of view, it's my life motif or my fil d'Arien. I work with them, and I make one position with the point of view in the space. About this point of view, the work begin on the reality. My dialogue with the reality begin with the painting. And at beginning, I play with the architecture, and I try to speak directly with them and faire apparaître des dessins.
So the design will appear actually,
yes,
thanks to
from one point of view, the form it's a flat, but this situation never exists because the painting it's all time in the space. In this situation was in one church in one closed church, but open for the exhibition. And the artists come to work inside in this church. It was in Paris, and Daniel Buren was at beginning for this exhibition, and he, with the other people, invited the artists to come to make the piece in the situation.
1983, your contribution.
Yes. I discovered, okay, here, it's in 85 in Paris, in the Cité des Sciences, and there are a big mirror, and one circle, il apparaît dans le miroir.
One circle is appearing in the mirror.
The other one make a circle around the miroir, behind the miroir. And the spectator can see what happened and can see itself. On the out of front or the out of point of view, the form begin to come
dislocated.
Okay. And then this piece it's from 93 in Paris in Musée d'Art Moderne de la Ville de Paris, and I work with 5 circles, and the small one must be all around the rectangle in the back. On the first one must be tangent.
It's touching another.
The first line on this piece, without the point of view, the reality change all time. On the people walk inside and make what he can make. Here I was in New York in 97 or 97. It was a big space in Chelsea, and it was an empty space. I can work. I can make this piece. On the one line, come from the right point and go on the top of column, on the come on the back, on the feet of the other column, and then happen this line, but this line come from this architecture. That is a big work in Switzerland. On the city is Bellinzona, and I put 3 arch on the 2 top of the tower, and I tried to find connection the other 6 points in the city, and the three arch going through everywhere. In the situation, you can see the piece all time out of the point of view. That is in French too. And I work a lot in the city, in the urban situation. This work was in Switzerland too, on the small village called Vercorin, and I put many circle on the building, on the chalet.
Would you say a word about how you proceed when you are invited somewhere to create a work? How do you work? How would you describe your procedure? What's the system? You come here on the place. What do you
normally
see?
Somebody called me to make exhibition, and in this case it was very funny because I never been in there, and I discovered this small village. And when I discovered that, I think, oh, it's time to do something on the carte postale, that's a paysage pittoresque.
Yeah, the postcard. Yeah.
Okay. And then I proposed to do this piece, and this piece it's with the aluminium foil, with the stick aluminium foil on the chalet. And okay, we decide to do that. And at this time we must speak with every propriétaire,
owner.
Every owner. There are 80 owners
that you have to convince.
Yes.
So
And we have discussed with them. We have a lot of discussion pour avoir les autorisations. That is a very funny moment. I am obligé to do that, but it's a very interesting moment. And finally, the piece appear on the voilà. You can see what happened out of the point of view. And this piece, it was in Paris in the exhibition called Dynamo, and in the Grand Palais à Paris. You can see all time the point of view. It's one moment, very fragile moment. My interesting to do that. It's what happened without out this point of view in the city when the people when you can walk in front of this columnade, or when you are inside, outside, and every reality. it's a part of my work.
It's like for Daniel's work, actually, every point of view brings a new existence of the work. I mean, the work doesn't is never enough in one point of view. Even the central point of view that you spoke about, you need many points of view. You need real time and space experience to get the reality of the work. I mean, to get closer to it, of course.
Well, the point of view for me, it's like tools for doing painting.
Exactly. So basically, every time you are using the real space and very simple forms, because the result when you install the works, when you do your painting work, is that those forms will totally be dislocated and be transformed into an amazingly complex pattern, actually. That's why I believe that the forms you use are so voluntarily minimal and simple. It reminds me, of course, of Daniel's work, of Daniel's decision, pretty early decisions to use only vertical lines, actually, to use simple things, because the way it's exploited through the space is amazingly complex, as we can see here. You are dealing with thousands of accidents, thousands of irregularities. And so there is a permanent dialectic between the classical geometric abstraction, playing with simple forms, easy to recognize, and a very complex result, actually, impossible to apprehend without being in the real space. So, and do you want to present this one as well?
That's okay.
Oh, this one. That's
that is the last one piece. I doing that in Brittany, in France. There are very old castle, but this castle was building in at the beginning of the 20th century, and I work with this line. This line come from the one point on going on the top and going and the down, ups and down, all around. Okay.
It's not mine.
Hein?
It's not mine.
J'ai pas compris.
So thank you, Felice.
I'm sorry for my English.
It was great.
Next time will be great.
So what we can all see to sum up your intervention is that you don't use the canvas, you don't use an object actually that you totally control from the beginning. You are basically dealing with an existing situation that you take the best of. So this idea of exploiting the work is definitely a nice link to Nicolas' collection, who has been oriented since a few years towards works from the 1950s and 60s that were most of them objects, but that tended to negate the idea of matter, of well-defined objects that is basically simple to apprehend. And those works that you've been collecting, Nicolas, are definitely linked with this idea of architecture, but not as a place that you will live in. You see, not as a building, but as phenomenological qualities of light and space, linked also to the displacement of the observer. So in your collection, you have a few names. We just took one of them, of artists that were major contributors to this history. And some of them actually were totally related to the formal abstract geometric art, and were playing with geometry with not something fixed, not as something fixed and well-defined, but something as basically elastic within time and space. So if you agree, I'll let you present a few important works of your collection that goes into this direction. Thank you.
So good afternoon. I'm very happy to be here in Chicago. I begin with this piece because it's a painting from Joseph Albers, and it's actually the only painting in my collection. And the reason it's the only painting is everything else in the collection is installations or sculptures or objects. And the reason I really appreciate these objects and sculptures is that rather than existing independently by themselves on the wall, they really interact with the space in which they are. So they exist not only by themselves, maybe they don't even exist by themselves, they exist through their relationship with the space. And what's really satisfying for the collector is because of that, they also exist through their relationship with you. And there is this unique physical connection that you establish with the work that is, I think, very unique to this field of art and very different from just looking at a canvas.
What you would say here, Nicolas, it's a very architectural property, actually, because seeing architecture is great from the outside, but basically you look at a building as you would look at a regular classic sculpture. It's basically making the experience of it getting into the work that will give the architectural feeling. And many of your works, including this one by Galland, Marcius Galland, get this property of exploding the classical limits of the canvas or the sculpture.
So we're showing this work because in a way, because it's the same color as the albus, it shows you how the albus gets off the wall into a three-dimensional space. Actually, these are not glass panels. They are just different colors of paint with small wood structures on the side. But it's an illustration of, how the artwork gets off the wall and into the space, and how you start interacting with that space. And of course, what's really interesting with the different approaches that the artists take in doing that is that they integrate their work into the architecture, and they also challenge what is architecture and what is art and what is an everyday object, and of course it's very relevant to these periods, and what is a work of art. So you recognize here work of Karl André, which is on the floor, which you have to walk on, which totally integrates itself with the space, but at the same time you do realize that it's a work of art, and it also reflects.
Can I say a word maybe on the André? It's basically it was defined by André himself as an element of architecture. Basically, what is on the floor is in metal, but it will define an invisible architecture that you are entering by the moment you step on the work that is on the floor. So it's basically putting the sculpture down as a floor and making the natural, usual sculpture as a part of the architectural's classic elements.
So maybe we'll continue to go through some of the works you recognize here. Dan Flavin. Here another example of a work of the 60s by Sobrino, who was Francisco Sobrino, who was based in Paris. Also illustrates an interesting aspect of this time where not only the artists do as we discussed earlier, but they also really challenge your perception. Very much as was explained by Daniel and by Felice, depending on your point of view, depending on where you stand, you see different things, and you start entering into this game, which make it particularly satisfying to look at these works every day, although I don't have that one in my living room, as you can imagine.
We could consider this work too as a prism that architecture can be seen through. Francisco Sobrino was really concerned about this question, playing with the surroundings. They are really minimal towers, so to say, but still they integrate their environment, they play with it, they dislocate it. It's always those sculptures that you have, including this book by Christian Megert, are definitely incorporating their environment, but not to flatter it, not to respect it, but to destroy it in a way. Robert Morris, with his 4 mirrored cubes, talked about a space destroyer. So the simple geometry that he is using has only purpose, is basically playing a complex game with the surroundings and not being closed on itself with like a true definition of what it is, but an open definition. Every time you present this kind of works, Sobrino's or Megert's, it basically changes the result. For example, here, you could tell me more about the environment, because all the letters we see are not in the works, in the objects.
The reflection of another work.
Yeah. It's a reflection of another work,
and which is why a lot of these works either use mirror or are transparent, use plexiglass, because that way they do play with the environment, they do reflect the environment, they do show through some part of the environment, and they create this complex game, basically. This is another work from Megert a little bit later, 71, another way to play with the source of light. And of course, you actually see yourself in the work. You see the architecture that is around the work, in the work, and you get the resulting interaction. Another work from, this is from François Morlaix. It's a more recent piece. Also shows you how, I mean, the artist also sometimes tries to actually do the architecture by himself and kind of be all the architecture of the environment.
It means, like for Solewit, that the work is architectural in itself. It's a construction that sometimes you can evolve it. If you mind going just back to the Morlaix, I remember when François showed me this work, he was posing behind the first cross, in between the motif, actually in between the two layers, like he was with his cane in between. It was a very recent work. So basically he was integrating real space, but of course playing with the idea, the illusion of a surface. This plays with 3 dimensions, and you could see there are 3 X, 2 are fixed on the floor, like reliefs, and 1 is in the air, actually. It connects the 2 walls, but of course, when looked from this very point of view, and that connects, of course, with Felice's work, you give the illusion of their frontality and the fact that the artist himself placed voluntarily his body in between, revealed the depth, the architectural depth of the work. Was very important for that. Was in Dynamo as well. Came real, actually, came into the real world of perception. And the fact that they are not photogenic in the documentary aspect of the term is very important, because they are to be experienced, and this is exactly about the relationship you were telling about. This is something that exists, that renews itself every second. The opposite of, let's say, a classical painting that is permanently flat, and it will be really reproduced easily within a regular image. By the moment you play, you are correct with the light, with the colors, it can be easily done. And I still believe that this kind of works, the work collected by Nicolas or Felice or done by Buren, are the future, in a way, of art. Maybe the future of abstraction. At the moment that these works can't be reproduced, they resist to the surrounding super strong world of images we are all living in. With our phone, with the tablets, with the computers, we are basically living in a completely total illusion. So basically, if we can speak about illusion for the works that we've seen, we speak more about deconstructing illusions and making this very simple, radical abstraction real. And of course, I believe that the expansion of the computers and imagery in the world can be thought from the inside by this kind of practice, because those works will definitely remind us something. We have a body, a perceiving body. We exist as human beings, as, we are not totally immaterial yet. So
I think that that's a really good place to end the conversation. Thank you all so much for your contributions today.